Hey y'all, welcome back to the grind. I guess the grind. Welcome back. Is that how you do introductions? I don't know. So I've been absent from videos for a while, mainly because I actually have had so many ideas ramming themselves into my brain. Sus. That every time I start working on one, whether it's an article or video or anything else, I just end up doing research, and then no content emerges. And thinking about this channel, like I've got to put it on a schedule, got to get it in line. The off season's fun. We kind of make videos about everything. I got to break down this rookie and that rookie post-draft and pre-draft. It kind of writes itself. But I think I have to get a little bit better about scheduling, because I really I have a life, I swear. And also to make content more consistent. So what I've been thinking about, especially thinking about the videos and channels I like watching the most on here, is I do have to get them shorter. I like the long stuff. I do it on the podcast. I'll continue to do it here too. But I want some regular stuff around here that's just the grind, as it's titled, I guess, around here. And so, like, I don't have, like, a hook, though. I'm not good at hooks. Like, 4 things you should know, 3 running backs to buy. I don't. But I am constantly finding out stuff, and we normally talk about it in the Patreon Discord, or eventually I'll write a mini article. But then again, we get back to the fact that content gets hard to do because I'm just doing so much research. So I thought maybe once a week, or whenever it happens, once a week. Let's just say once a week. This is just kind of things I learned this week that I think are interesting or of note, that I'm using to adjust my rankings, that I'm using to assess the 2021 season to come, or the next week when we get in season. And so yeah, this is the first version of that type of video on this channel. It's just the grind, what I learned this week. Yeah, and I guess maybe a title that kind of explains what it's about. I don't know. We'll see. I guess you've already seen the title, so let me know what I came up with in the comments, I guess. But yeah, I've been looking at a lot of stuff this week, and I just thought I'd run through 3 or 4 things, just a small list to get a video out to let you all know what I've been up to, some of what I've been up to. That's not about the Scott Fish Bowl, have no fear, although I'm getting some lit value over there, I gotta tell you. But, yeah, just things that I found this week that are interesting. I don't really know what to do with them yet, but they are things that are thoughts that I have discovered that I think might have some value to you. So I'm good at branding. I'm good at selling you things as this means I have given you vital information that no one else knows. I'm sure everyone knows some version of it, but this is what I found while I was researching this week. Let's go look at a spreadsheet, shall we? So one thing that I was doing, and I was posting it in the Patreon Discord, and I just thought I'd actually build it out in the, at least a tab for myself, in the NFL database that we put out. I was just looking at offensive regression. We're always talking about regression year over year. JJ Zacharyson on his recent podcast, Late Round Podcast, if you don't listen to it, listen to it. Unsponsored, just a great podcast to listen to. And was talking about how one of the key things that everyone should pay attention to, even if you boil everything down, is regression, because it's a thing that happens. It's just one of the vital keys that statistics or analytics, is that what the nerds call it, give you access to. And one of the things we're constantly paying attention to with regression is touchdowns. Touchdowns regress back to an average. Now, they regress back to an average for the player once we have a significant enough sample size of them, but by and large, it's fair to look at regression to a mean for the league, just to get an idea of if a player is going to score more or less yards. Now, regression is a difficult concept, especially made more difficult by the way it's used constantly and misrepresented, so I'd try and do my best to wrap up some of those problems in this video, and also talk about what it can and can't do. So what you're basically looking at here is a table where I calculated the number of yards scored by year for all offenses in the receiving, the rushing game, and then the number of touchdowns in the receiving and rushing game. Because one thing that I do know is that touchdowns regress on a yards per touchdown basis fairly consistently across all positions. Now, each position and each player, again, inside those positions, have their own averages, but by and large, they stay within a range, especially given a significant enough sample sample size, like a player's career will eventually crest, even if they're Devontae Adams or Rob Gronkowski, back towards that position average, for example. So it's this holistic view that can give you a decent idea of who's overall underperforming in touchdowns last year without having to use red zone stats or get overly complicated with it. It's just how many touchdowns were they scoring per yard. If they were getting a touchdown every 50 yards, no matter what the position, that was probably too efficient. That's probably not going to keep going, especially if they were doing over a broad sample size that we expect to keep up with that volume in the following year. So that's essentially what this is. I also broke it down by wide receiver and running back, but I don't want to do, like, this isn't a look at this sheet video that I made, which I know I make all the time and I'll continue to make, but it's more just a lens of 2020. And it's been said before, and I've said it before as well, like 2020 was an exceptional year. We've actually been looking about a 3-year average. I posted this and no one questioned me on it, like everyone knew, so maybe you already know. But over the last 3 years, we've consistently we're getting more and more points out of the receiving game and the rushing game, and specifically that shows up with touchdowns as well. Over the last 3 years, on average, NFL teams have been scoring like a touchdown for every 144 yards, and that's just all touchdowns, rushing and receiving yards. Now, the league average since 2009 is 154. So over the last 3 years, we've actually seen a significant, larger than expected efficiency. Just in terms of how many touchdowns we're getting per yard, we have seen increased scoring. And one of the things I think I see when I look back through the history is, honestly, I see it timing with draft classes. Now, some of that, I haven't tested it, so it could just be a narrative, the way my eyes skim over the data. But after 2014, we see a slight increase from the league average as well. And if you look specifically through the rushing game, after 2011, we see a slight increase in terms of how many touchdowns per yard we're getting. And that 2011 class brought us a lot of different good running backs, and after the 2014 class we see a slight uptick in the receiving game as well. Now, this isn't analytical, it's just kind of what I'm expecting to see, and so I'm finding it. But I do think the talent available at each and any position, or for teams in general, is going to have a wide scale effect on the amount of production you're getting, and so that kind of makes sense to me, to be honest with you, and that's probably why I'm seeing it. But I do think it's significant that 2020 is literally 2 standard deviations different from the league average. Like, there's been no other year like that, whether it's 2014, 2011 running back class, or whatever other class you want to look like. Like, 2020 was weird. Now, a lot of that's been related to pass interference calls and the fact that quarterbacks are being less harried, less sacked, unless you're Joe Burrow, in the 2020 season. Also, we had a national pandemic. Defenses were definitely on their back foot from a lack of preparation, much more so than offenses, where the defenses have to work as more as a collective unit, and all of that is rolled up into those higher scoring numbers. So we should expect that to regress back in 2021, which is why I've talked about in the podcast about how 2021 is probably going to be a disappointing year in some ways, because coming off of 2020, like, it almost can't not be a disappointment. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to see great seasons and the NFL is not going to be fun to watch, or some players aren't just going to blow regression out the water and regress again in a future year. That'll definitely happen, but over the last few years, especially with the quarterback boom before the national pandemic and the 2020 season, global pandemic, that happened to increase scoring so drastically in 2020, we've been benefiting from new, exciting offensive weapons, from Patrick Mahomes to Justin Herbert last year, even Dak Prescott having 2 top 5 QB seasons, and Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, and like all of that stuff going on. And it's not that it's going to lull so much as we're going to ease into the new normal for the next coming years, as we saw after the 2014 season, after we saw after that great running back class as well. Like, the higher rate is going to feel more normal. We shouldn't continue to expect it to escalate. Eventually it's going to plateau and regress back towards an average. Now, the average might be higher than it's been since 2009, as the last 3 years suggests it will be, but it will be less dramatic of a change compared to that since 2009 average than we've been really benefiting from over the last 3 years. Now, One of the things to know about, especially touchdown regression, looking at it through this lens, is that it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to create a difference. For example, some players regress and you barely even notice. Patrick Mahomes regressed a ton. For example, in his big season, he had like something crazy, like 66% of his games in that big season a couple of years ago, he finished in the top 5. That's where Patrick Mahomes gets his hype and his forever legacy from, in fantasy at least. Since then, he's regressed back to about a positional average for players for quarterbacks in the top 12. Around last year, from memory, I think about 33% of his games were in the top 12, which is, again, about normal. Between 30 and 35% of top 12 quarterbacks are going to score in the top 5 about 30 to 33% of the time, 35% of the time, and Patrick Mahomes was right in that average. Despite having a great year, some players outscored him, but he's still definitely, I'm not trying to take away from that legacy or saying he isn't in a tier of his own in my Superflex ranks. That's still true, but even he regressed, and he regressed in a way that we didn't really feel necessarily, because when he didn't get passing touchdowns, he got rushing touchdowns, and when he didn't have an exceptional 30-point game, there was an exceptional play we all enjoyed and wish we had on our roster, and that doesn't mean that has to stop in 2021. In fact, I don't believe it will. But it does mean, is an example of how everything regresses, although sometimes that doesn't mean you have to make a drastic change, like sell Patrick Mahomes for everything you can, because it's going to drop off the face of the earth. Regressing doesn't necessarily mean that player's not going to be good anymore. In the same way, the league should definitely not equal its 2020 season, but also will reach a new normal, and there'll be less escalation in excitement and new avenues of fantasy points and touchdowns per yards and all of this. Still doesn't mean there won't be excitement. It will be a good scoring year that for different ways. I'm not predicting like a 2015 season or a 2012 season or 2011 season, which is freaking terrible for the receiving game overall. But it is worth noting, just on a broad lens, that we're definitely coming down off the 2020, and also that's coupled with a 3-year continued escalation in scoring, both the receiving and the rushing game, that we're probably more adjusted to now, so it may feel a little bit disappointing in 2021. I don't know what to do with that, but that's a thought that came up when I was looking at this particular research, and it was interesting. The other thing that came up, and I was talking about this in the Patreon Discord, and they seemed thoroughly unimpressed, so again, you might find it unimpressive as well. But last year, New York Giants scored like 12 receiving touchdowns and 13 rushing touchdowns. That's abominable, even for a Daniel Jones-led offense. And based on this touchdown rate, like every team I can find with this level of below league average touchdown performance has at least doubled its touchdown production the following season. And in the same way I was talking about regression, that doesn't mean like Sterling Shepard, top 12 wide receiver. He could still be barely a top 36 wide receiver and you don't want to start him most weeks, and the team still increase its touchdown production. Also, Saquon Barkley's coming back, so that's going to double just because of that reason. But I would say it's a positive note for someone like Kenny Golladay going to the New York Giants, even with a Daniel Jones problem. Like, even Daniel Jones should regress, like basically double his touchdown production in 2021, just because, I mean, a broken clock and a Daniel Jones both stumble into touchdowns now and again, and that didn't happen in 2020. While the rest of the league was going off, Daniel Jones, the next great quarterback, according to some, back when, like, literally couldn't stumble into more than 12 receiving touchdowns. So I don't think that's going to continue in 2021. They're basically going to double their touchdown totals. That doesn't mean they're all going to finish in the top 12 in scoring, but it is positive news for Kenny Golladay, who just went there. And normally I'd consider it a bad thing, because touchdowns and quarterbacks seem to have more of a correlation than, say, targets. Also, they have a correlation to passing attempts, but that's neither here nor there. And also someone like Evan Engram, who's maintained like a 20% share of that opportunity in that offense. Like, since his first season, despite his ADP dropping, he's still been garnering the opportunity. The team's just been abysmal outside of Saquon Barkley after they lost Odell Beckham. So I think just natural regression and the fact that Evan Engram should hold that opportunity. Like, I'm not going to say he's going to outproduce Travis Kelce, nothing that crazy, but he's going to be a much more streamable option. He's coming at a very reasonable ADP. I'm targeting him in most places that I'm drafting or trading this season if I need a tight end. I think Evan Engram's value and reward, especially when you consider something like this broader trend of their touchdown production. And yeah, it's wheels up at that value, and I think Evan Engram can get back to being a more streamable option, especially with that opportunity. But yeah, there are some other teams in here as well, but again, I don't want to break down the sheet. Weirdly, the Jacksonville Jaguars were surprisingly underproductive in touchdowns and rushing. Now, I think having James Robinson and Travis Etienne on the same team, ETN, sorry, will adjust that naturally. Again, that doesn't mean they're both going to be top 12 running backs, or necessarily that either of them are going to be, because, again, just because you regress doesn't mean you should exponentially shoot up a team's players' projection. For example, their running back 3 and 4 could catch or run a few extra touchdowns, and that accounts for most of the outlier regression. But it is notable that the Jacksonville Jaguars, despite if I can find the damn team, despite James Robinson going off last year as an undrafted free agent, were actually underproductive. They had less rushing touchdowns than you'd expect, probably because he was the only one on the team. And again, there are now 2 good running backs there, so that should probably take care of itself. But it's something I noted, something I learned this week, that despite James Robinson's great season, the team on a holistic basis, on a broad level basis, was actually underproductive in touchdowns in the rushing game. And I thought that was interesting and neat. You probably don't. Anyway, what else did I learn this week? Let's go take a look at something else. Alright, so I made a sophomore model. I've actually had a sophomore model that I've never actually included in the database because I was kind of working it and tweaking it and kept thinking I could do better. But instead I just want a fair way to look at a player's running back, tight end, and wide receiver and comparing to past players and some level of objective how good were their seasons. So I did that. I actually created a few different ones. One I've settled on, there's some rough R-squared scores going on up here, which I'm actually using a filter function for within the R-squared formula, and I guess I can do a how-to video on that. Like the filter function, the Discord, the Patreon Discord literally taught me about that, because, there are people that are better at this than me in my own Discord. It's fantastic. But it works really niftily, especially when you combine it with a formula like R-squared, because you can filter for certain results. So here I've got it just testing points per game versus a model of the wide receivers I've got in this particular sheet, which is every wide receiver with 600 receiving yards or more in the rookie season. And it's projecting their points per game in their second year, in their sophomore season, and the model's testing the R-squared of what the model suggested compared to what they actually got. And you see it's scoring about a 34 R-squared or 34%. Expected points per game scores about a 29%. Targets were scoring 28%. And I've got points per game around here somewhere. Again, it's not like it's exponentially beating stuff, but it is beating it in the samples that I test, and therefore I think it's a pretty reasonable model. And actually, having dug back through past seasons, it's really interesting to consider yards per snap or yards per team pass attempt, depending on which one of those in the NFL database you like the most, have a preference for. Because if you look at the ones that the model gets wrong, there's some interesting comparisons to making the yards per team snap, or the yards per snap, or the yards per team pass attempt. Like sometimes that will lead you to players, and I'm really trying to find how to read it, because again, 34% isn't perfect, and there are some things, like when I rank top to bottom since 2012, because that's when I have snap data from, like these are the top seasons for any rookie wide receiver, and Brandon Ayuk is in there, and I think I have to admit at this point that he had a great rookie season. There's really no way of taking that away. But looking at the San Francisco 49ers offense and continuing to not really want to invest fantasy capital in there, I found myself trying to prove that I shouldn't like Brandon Ayuk, which is backwards. That's not how you meant to do it. You meant to take conclusions from the research, and I found that I was trying to disprove Brandon Ayuk, and so I stopped doing it. At this point, I just have to accept he had a fantastic season. I think his 2021 projection is abysmal compared to his ADP, because I think it's George Kittle or bust in that offense, and that's about it. I have some interest in Trey Lance, but he's already been jumped off draft boards like he's going to hit, and I don't care about quarterback that much, and so mostly it's just Kittle or bust for me, and I think Deebo Samuels is going at a value, because I really don't know. I mean, Deebo Samuel's rookie season is 16th since 2012 in terms of rookie seasons. 4 players had over 600 yards, so over that threshold of having a good season. So that's actually a really good score. It's not fine, it's not bad, it's good. Like, I'm trying to create a tier system so that when I upload this to the NFL database, it can be somewhat descriptive, not just a number like 20 points per game, but how good is that? That's as best good as it's ever been. That was Odell Beckham. So, I would list Deebo Samuels as a good season. Brandon Ayuk's, again, his 2020 season, just stick with the data here, Pete. It rates as excellent. There are very few players that have ever had a season as good as a rookie as Brandon Ayuk did, even if it only manifested into, like, what is he, the wide receiver something or other? I hid that column, so I don't know. But a top 24 wide receiver. But I think once you consider Deebo Samuel there are reasons that I can still be out on Brandon Ayuk at his ADP fairly, using data, not trying to disprove something that is clearly true. And the George Kittle or bust narrative, not narrative, plumb fact, that's what the offense is probably going to be. But he did have a good 2020 season as a rookie, which means, especially if I'm right about what happens in 2021, I will probably be a heavy Brandon Ayuk buyer, because if he finishes inside or outside the top 24, I think his value will take a significant dip. He'll become truther status, a la Juju Smith-Schuster, for example, and that's when I'd be interested in investing in him. Having said that, if you've been higher on Brandon Ayuk before me, at this point I just have to admit, I have to stop trying to disprove there's something that's just obviously true. He had an amazing rookie season, like an elite tier rookie season, and I just need to accept that. That his name comes up right next to Kelvin Benjamin is fun for me, but the one thing I note, and especially while doing this research, I was like, I've said it before, but I don't think I internalized it. We really don't know how Kelvin Benjamin's career would have worked out. I realize I have internalized him as bad because I hated his college profile, and the fact that he busted out after that first year breakout, I always took as a sign of stick to your rookie profiles. He's one of the pins I've got in don't forget your rookie profiles. And there's very few players that hit, so there are very few pins to have, and very few players that my rookie profiles hate and then hit, even fewer. In fact, 3. So, and all of them have this bad rookie profile, or at least Kelvin Benjamin, who basically accounts for 30% of the players that outbeat my expectation as a rookie wide receiver. And like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe if his career, he hadn't torn his ACL, Carolina hadn't gone through the changes they went through, and then Cam Newton got hurt, and then Cam Newton's not on the team anymore, and now Kelvin Benjamin's a tight end, but he could have continued. It's like John Ross. I feel like John Ross conforms to my opinions of rookie wide receiver profiles coming from college, but I never really, and probably never will, get to see him play in college to either confirm or deny. I'll definitely never see him get the opportunity year 1, year 2, and year 3 like a regular first round wide receiver to see if my profile of him was accurate. And so when I thought about it from that lens, even Brandon Ayuk and Kelvin Benjamin comparisons aren't really a detriment to Brandon Ayuk, because the only player in this top 12 list that did badly after this point was Kelvin Benjamin. So maybe I've just got a confirmation bias against Kelvin Benjamin. And the other thing is that Brandon Ayuk was efficient and Kelvin Benjamin wasn't. And in fact, they make very bad comparisons, because Brandon Ayuk's ADOT was 9 and Kelvin Benjamin was 14. They were playing in vastly different areas of the field, and so their seasons don't really compare very well at all. I will say, I still think that Brandon Ayuk and the Deebo Samuel, which is the number 1 wide receiver, it's still very much an up in the air question for me, and I'm leaning Deebo, especially at value, and I can make Deebo, without using splits arguments, is the wide receiver 1 in this offense. And both of them are outside the top 24 and 2021 arguments without having to rely on splits, while still accepting that Brandon Ayuk had an amazing rookie season. And that's something I do want to not just accept like it matters if I believe it, and also internalize, because if what I think is going to happen in 2021 happens, then Brandon Ayuk will fall in value, and this will still be true. He still had an amazing rookie season. One of the reasons I'm still heavily buying on Juju Smith-Schuster, who's right here in the top 12 seasons as well. Alright, so that's another thing I looked at. Also, it was really last week, but I thought I'd include it in this video because why not? I've been playing with drop-down menus in Excel. I've included them in all the NFL databases and the college database at this point. So if I have an option where you can you were meant to type in what you wanted. Now you can actually just select from a drop-down menu, and it auto updates, and that just makes it feel almost like an app, almost a little fancy. I can even limit the number of lists you're able to see, because over here I've got it where you can select the players that you want, and if I figured out how to format that conditional formatting so I can have that list only produce running backs or wide receivers or whatever I ever want to do. I still have to learn a lot about it, but right now it's in the databases if you want to play around with them, and it's really pretty cool tool. I've been doing a lot of work on running back breakouts, which is why you see the second highest drafted sophomore running backs since 2014 in Dynasty ADP, and this chart's bringing up the round they were drafted. Right now, Cam Akers is the highest drafted, second valued sophomore running back since, or all the way since Giovanni Bernard. I was just looking away at putting Cam Akers' value in context as a sophomore running back, because Cam Akers is someone, again, that I'm low on, but when I'm running them through those sophomore models, he actually had a good season. So it comes down to the way I read why his season was good. I honestly think that him and Darrell Henderson might be in more of a split than most people are putting Cam Akers in the first round in some instances, or the second round of a dynasty startup. Like, I think that can really adversely affect your team if he is in more of a committee with Darrell Henderson, because both pretty much had good years, but there's a lot going in Cam Akers' profile after doing that breakout research. For example, something else I learned this week, it's almost worth betting on running backs that don't get the full opportunity year one. If you get the opportunity year one, you should expect to hit in the range that you want that player to hit. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire getting the job in year one and then not being a top 12 running back is bad. Now, he also plays for Kansas City, so I can consistently hope that team just elevates his efficiency, but I should probably expect him to be a top 24 running back going forward. I can't yet bring myself to do that, but given breakout history, that makes sense. With Cam Akers, who did get such a smaller share of the pie, he didn't work his way into the job until later into the season, there is room for expansion of his role in the offense, and that's where a lot of sophomore running back breakouts come from. It's basically 50-50. The other 50% are the Josh Jacobs and David Montgomerys, who get an efficiency spike, we think because of a strength of schedule issue that happened in that particular season. Fortunately, we don't have great ways of predicting strengths of schedule. It's basically just worth ignoring. But it does mean that players that get the opportunity, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, could see that kind of variance in year two and conform to the David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs breakout arc. But it also means that then their value wouldn't go up, so they're much more of a production bet, as has happened with Josh Jacobs and David Montgomery. So those are some of the things I learned this week and some of the things I've been looking at. Jamar Chase is also being drafted as highly as any dynasty wide receiver one since 2014. The last time we drafted a wide receiver this high, it was Corey Davis. Last few years, and since the letdown years of 2015 and 16 and 17, we learnt our lesson and dropped the wide receiver one value. But with Jamar Chase, we've actually boosted him right into the third round. Currently, I don't have July ADP yet, just June's. And that's awkward because I want nothing but Jamar Chase. If I get one thing out of my rookie value this year, I want Jamar Chase. And if you drafted him in a rookie draft, that means you've immediately made a value move, because that is not that's not what you pay for first round draft picks where Jamar Chase is going for. He's already worth more apparently in dynasty startups than you are paying in your rookie draft. Now that's awkward because if I have a player since 2014 that I expect to conform or outproduce rookie wide receiver one standards, I would say it was Jamar Chase, and that's a bigger argument and an article I want to write as well. But right now we're kind of paying for it. I don't expect his value to go anywhere though. Unlike a Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Montgomery or a Jacobs, he could basically just do the average of 600 yards and he'll be fine. But paying that in startup price right now really does put you in this crux of you kind of people are either going to be overpaying again next year, or the value is going to remain stable, or it will drop. It's a really difficult value move right now. But again, it's something I want to look into a little bit more and write up for Dynasty League football. So I think that's enough. Right? I learned a lot about the Scott Fish Bowl this year. obviously. But yeah, those are some of the things I've been looking at this week. We've been discussing them in the Patreon Discord, as well as a bunch of other stuff. I normally check out the Discord, and it's just full of conversations like I can't catch up with and barely understand. Someone took my Scott Fishbowl draft sheet that I was putting out for anyone that gave donations. Not a go playing Scott Fishbowl comment, just it's something I made, I put out there for everyone, and one of the patrons got hold of it and put script in there so it would auto-update draft picks instead of having to use this drop-down menu I created. So they're doing better things than I can. Like I'm actually excited to be part of that Discord group. This isn't like a join the Discord group. This is it's one of my favorite places to be right now, so thank you all. If you're in the Discord, I just want to let you know, I really enjoy listening to you all talk in there. Like, I've learned stuff, like these filter menus, and like how to use a filter and a formula, and you're all awesome, so thanks for that. But also, yeah, I guess that's the other stuff I learned this week, that I should read my Discord religiously, because they're basically teaching me stuff every day, and I appreciate that. Big screen and goodbye. Yeah. So I really thought these videos could be like 10-minute YouTube things, because most of the videos I like to watch, they're 4 minutes, like Sal's 4 for 4 podcast, which is on YouTube, or Kuda Doodles, petite pods, and I love tuning into those just when I'm on my phone or whatnot, and even planning to do that, I've made a 30-minute video, so I'll try and get better at them, but I do think regular video schedule that I can do is just things I've been looking at this week and things I've taken away from it, because they're not definite, go draft this running back, but I think they're really interesting pieces of information that are informing the way I make takes or write articles, and there's not a great way of sharing just an interesting thing I found that doesn't roll itself up into a CeeDee Lamb is overrated article, overdrafted. Actually, Cooper's already written this, or Jalen Waddle might be drafted this year despite his potential for high upside, which is an article I'm hoping to write, as well as the Cam Akers, anti-Antonio Gibson takes. I got a lot of things to write up, okay? But there are also just some little nuggets that I find, or someone in my Discord finds every week, that I'd like to share with you all. So let me know if that's a good idea, and I'll start to do this more often. Also, sorry, it's literally dark outside and still hot as hell in Kentucky, so there's a weather update. That's why I'm sweating. It's not just the nerves of talking to you all. Anyway, I'm going to go and check on my Scott Fishbowl draft. Thanks very much. If you checked it out this far, really appreciate it. If you watched it for 5 minutes, I really appreciate it, but you didn't get the thank you. So, that's the payoff of watching. I guess. Yeah, I'm out. Thanks very much. Talk to you again next week. As soon as I record a podcast, which is like 3 days late. I've really got to develop a schedule.